Have you ever had someone underestimate you so badly that it lit a fire inside you couldn't extinguish? That's exactly what happened to Mark Daniels, a single father desperate for work who walked into Elise Montgomery's office with nothing but determination and a photo of his daughter in his wallet. If this story of resilience against all odds speaks to you, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more incredible true stories that remind us what we're capable of when pushed to our limits. This journey of unexpected connection and triumph over adversity might just be the inspiration you need today. The fluorescent lights of Montgomery Tech's lobby seemed to buzz louder than usual as Mark Daniels straightened his second-hand tie and checked his watch for the 5th time. He was early, 20 minutes early, to be exact, but when you're a single father with a 6-year-old daughter depending on you, you don't take chances. Not with interviews, not with anything. The weight of responsibility had been his alone for the past 2 years, and some days it felt like trying to breathe underwater. But he kept swimming, kept fighting, because Sophia deserved nothing less. The lobby was intimidating in its sleek modernity, all glass and chrome and success. People in expensive suits walked with purpose, their shoes clicking confidently on the polished marble floor. Mark felt out of place in his navy blue suit that had seen better days, purchased 3 years ago when life had been different, when Emily had still been alive and they'd been planning for a future together. Now the shoulders were slightly too loose, stress and grief had whittled away at his frame, but it was the best he had. "Mr. Daniels?" The receptionist's voice cut through his thoughts. She was young and polished, with a Bluetooth earpiece and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ms. Montgomery will see you now." Mark swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. Everyone in the tech industry knew Elise Montgomery's reputation. Brilliant, ruthless, and notoriously difficult to work for. The CEO had built her empire from nothing, and the turnover rate at Montgomery Tech was legendary. But so was the pay, and after being laid off 3 months ago from Apex Solutions during a company-wide restructuring, Mark's savings were dwindling to dangerous levels. Sophia's asthma medication alone cost more than their rent, and the health insurance from his previous job would expire at the end of the month. He followed the receptionist down a long hallway lined with awards and press features. The Titan of Tech, proclaimed one headline above a photo of Elise Montgomery, arms crossed, expression fierce. Montgomery revolutionizes industry standards, declared another. Mark tried to quiet the nervous drumming of his heart as they approached a set of double doors at the end of the corridor. The corner office was exactly what he'd expected, minimalist, expensive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished concrete floor. Elise Montgomery sat behind a glass desk, not bothering to look up from her computer as he entered. At 38, she was younger than most CEOs of companies this size, with sharp features and dark hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Her charcoal gray suit probably cost more than his monthly rent. "You're the systems analyst?" she asked, still not looking at him, her fingers continuing to move rapidly across her keyboard. "Yes, ma'am." Mark Daniels. He stood awkwardly, unsure whether to sit in one of the 2 chairs facing her desk or wait for an invitation. She finally glanced up, her eyes cold and assessing as they moved from his face to his suit and back again. There was something almost clinical in her gaze, as if he were a specimen under a microscope rather than a potential employee. "Your resume says you have 8 years of experience, but there's a 2-year gap." It wasn't a question, but an accusation. Mark's throat tightened. This was always the hardest part of interviews, explaining the hole in his professional history without letting the grief seep into his voice. "My wife passed away unexpectedly. I took some time to be with my daughter. She needed stability during that transition." Something flickered across Elisa's face, so quickly he almost missed it, before the mask of indifference returned. Was it sympathy? Annoyance? He couldn't tell. "I see. And now you think you can handle the demands of this position while being a single parent?" "I know I can," Mark said, with more confidence than he felt. "I've built a support system. My neighbor helps with childcare, and I've arranged my daughter's schedule to accommodate full-time work. My previous employer can verify that I never missed deadlines, even during that difficult period. Elise gestured to one of the chairs. Sit. Mark sat, trying not to show his relief at finally being off his feet. The chair was uncomfortable despite its expensive appearance, perhaps by design, to keep visitors from staying too long. Elise leaned back in her chair, studying him with unnerving intensity. Her eyes were a striking shade of gray, like storm clouds gathering. Do you know why I agreed to this interview, Mr. Daniels? Your technical qualifications are adequate, but barely. What intrigued me was the letter of recommendation from James Chen. He rarely praises anyone. Mark nodded. James had been his mentor at his first job out of college, before retiring to care for his ailing wife. The letter had been a parting gift, written when Mark had been laid off. James taught me everything I know about systems architecture. He believed in setting impossible standards and then exceeding them. He said you were tenacious, Elise continued, tapping a manicured finger against a folder that presumably contained his application materials. That you solved problems others couldn't because you refused to accept failure as an option. I'm curious to see if that's true. She checked her watch, a sleek, expensive timepiece that probably cost more than his car. It's 6 p.m. now. I have a system migration that needs to be completed by morning. The last 3 analysts I hired couldn't handle the pressure. I'll bet you $500 you won't last 10 minutes once you see what you're up against. Mark blinked, certain he had misheard. Excuse me? You heard me. $500 says you walk out that door within 10 minutes of seeing the project requirements. Money you clearly need, based on that suit. Her eyes flicked dismissively over his attire again, lingering on the slightly frayed cuff of his shirt sleeve. Consider it a signing bonus if you prove me wrong. Which you won't. Anger flared in Mark's chest, hot and sudden. Not just at her arrogance, but at the system that had left him here, begging for work from someone who saw his struggle as entertainment. He thought of Sophia, waiting at the neighbor's apartment, probably already asleep with her stuffed triceratops clutched to her chest. He thought of the past due notices piling up on his kitchen counter, the calls from collection agencies he'd started to screen. He thought of Emily, and how she'd always believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. I'll take that bet, he said quietly, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. But I won't be the one paying. A smile, cold and amused, curved Elise's lips. It didn't reach her eyes. Follow me. She stood in one fluid motion and walked toward a door at the side of her office, not bothering to check if he was following. Mark grabbed his messenger bag and hurried after her, down another hallway and into what appeared to be a war room of sorts. 3 large monitors dominated one wall, and whiteboards covered the others, filled with diagrams and notes in different handwritings. The monitors displayed what could only be described as digital chaos. Code scrolled across one screen, error messages flashed on another, and the third showed a countdown, 11 hours, 42 minutes until system launch. The room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Our entire client management system needs to be migrated to the new platform by 6 a.m., Elise explained, her tone matter-of-fact. The previous team made a mess of it. The migration failed twice already, and we've promised our clients a seamless transition by morning. Fix it, or we lose our 3 biggest clients, worth approximately $40 million in annual revenue. She handed him a security badge. This will give you access to all the systems you need. The documentation, what little exists, is on the server. Clock's ticking, Mr. Daniels. I'll be in my office when you're ready to admit defeat. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and Mark stood alone, staring at the disaster before him. For a moment, just a moment, he considered walking out. This wasn't just a difficult task, it was potentially impossible. If 3 previous analysts had failed, what chance did he have? Then he thought of Sophia's smile when he'd promised her they'd be okay, that Daddy would find a new job and they wouldn't have to move from the apartment where all her memories of Mommy lived. He set his worn messenger bag on the table, pulled out his laptop, and got to work. The first hour was brutal. The code was a tangled mess, with no documentation and seemingly random patches throughout. It was like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces belonged to different puzzles entirely. By hour 2, Mark had identified the major issues but was nowhere near solving them. His eyes burned from staring at the screen, and his back ached from hunching over his laptop. His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Patel next door, saying Sophia was asking for him. He texted back that he'd be working late and asked if Sophia could stay overnight. Mrs. Patel agreed, as she had many times before during his desperate job search. He sent a voice message for Sophia, promising to make her special Sunday pancakes tomorrow with extra chocolate chips, and telling her to be good for Mrs. Patel. He didn't mention where he was or what he was doing. No need to burden her with adult problems. The third hour brought a breakthrough of sorts. Mark discovered that the migration was failing because the new system's authentication protocols were incompatible with the legacy data structure. It wasn't just a matter of transferring data, the entire framework needed to be reimagined. He began sketching on one of the whiteboards, mapping out a potential solution that would bridge the old and new systems without compromising security or data integrity. At 9 p.m., the door opened. Elise returned, clearly expecting to find the room empty. Instead, Mark was surrounded by empty coffee cups, his tie discarded, sleeves rolled up, and 3 whiteboards filled with diagrams and code snippets. His eyes were red-rimmed, but focused. "You're still here," she said, surprise evident in her voice. She was still in her work clothes, though she'd removed her blazer, revealing a silk blouse the color of burgundy wine. Mark didn't look up from his laptop. "I believe you owe me $500. The bet was that you'd quit in 10 minutes. Not that you'd solve the problem." Her tone was cool, but there was something else there, curiosity, perhaps. "Then I guess we'll see in the morning, won't we?" He continued typing, refusing to give her the satisfaction of his full attention. Part of him, the part that wasn't exhausted and stressed, was enjoying the small act of defiance. Elise lingered for a moment, observing his work on the whiteboards. Her expression gave nothing away. "Interesting approach," she finally said, before turning and leaving without another word. Mark worked steadily through the evening, fueled by vending machine coffee and determination. He restructured the authentication protocols, created a temporary bridge between the systems, and began testing small data transfers to ensure the integrity of the process. Each small success gave him renewed energy. By midnight, he had restructured the core migration protocol but was hitting a wall with the client data transfer. Some of the legacy data was corrupted, causing the new system to reject entire batches of information. His eyes burned, his back ached, and doubt began to creep in. Maybe this was impossible. Maybe Elise Montgomery had set him up to fail as some sort of twisted power play. Maybe this was how she got her kicks, watching desperate people scramble for jobs they had no hope of securing. He stood up, stretching his cramped muscles, and paced the length of the room. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, a sea of possibilities and lives being lived while he was trapped in this glass and steel prison with an impossible task. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine walking out, going home to Sophia, admitting defeat. But then what? The bills wouldn't stop coming. Sophia's medication wouldn't become magically affordable. The door opened again. Mark expected another check-in from Elise, but instead, a young man in jeans and a Montgomery Tech t-shirt appeared with a tray of food. "Ms. Montgomery thought you might be hungry," he said, setting down sandwiches, fruit, and a thermos of what smelled like real coffee, not the vending machine sludge Mark had been surviving on. Mark blinked in surprise. "Thanks. No problem. I'm Dev, by the way. I work in IT support." The young man glanced at the monitors. Looks like you're making progress on the migration. That's more than the last guy managed. What happened to him? Mark asked, unwrapping a sandwich, turkey and avocado on artisan bread, far better than he'd expected. Dev shrugged. Walked out around 10 p.m., said it was impossible and Ms. Montgomery was insane for expecting it to be done overnight. And the others? Similar stories. One lasted until 2 a.m. before having a complete meltdown. It wasn't pretty. Dev glanced toward the door, then lowered his voice. Between you and me, I think she's testing more than your technical skills. She needs someone who won't crack under pressure. Mark considered this as he ate. The food revived him somewhat, and the coffee was strong and good. Thanks for the food and the insight. Dev nodded. Good luck, man. For what it's worth, I hope you pull it off. We need more normal humans around here. With that cryptic statement, he left, leaving Mark alone with his thoughts and the seemingly insurmountable task before him. As he ate, he stared at the error messages, mind racing. There was something he was missing, some connection between the legacy system and the new architecture that wasn't translating properly. He pulled up the company's organizational charts, studying the data flow, when a thought struck him. What if the problem wasn't in the code itself, but in how the systems were communicating? What if, instead of forcing the old data to conform to the new system's expectations, he created an intermediary layer that could speak both languages? He worked with renewed energy, fueled by the food and the glimmer of a solution. His fingers flew across the keyboard, creating a translation layer that would sit between the two systems, interpreting and reformatting data as needed. By 2 a.m., he had rewritten the transfer protocols and was running a test migration of a sample dataset. The door opened again. This time it was Elise, looking slightly less polished than before. Her hair had come loose from its severe style, falling in soft waves around her face, and she'd changed into a more casual outfit, black pants and a gray cashmere sweater that softened her appearance considerably. Progress? She asked, her voice neutral as she approached the monitors. Mark gestured to the center screen where data was flowing smoothly from one system to another. The core issue was in the authentication protocols. Whoever designed this tried to force the old security framework into the new system instead of building a proper bridge. I've created an intermediary layer that translates between the two systems, preserving data integrity while allowing for the differences in structure. Elise moved closer, studying his solution. For several minutes, she said nothing, just watched the data transfer with an unreadable expression. Mark found himself holding his breath, waiting for her verdict. This is elegant, she finally said. You've maintained the integrity checks while streamlining the process. She wasn't looking at him, but at his work, with what almost seemed like respect. Most people would have tried to force the systems to conform to each other. Your solution allows them to remain distinct while still communicating effectively. It still needs work, Mark admitted, surprised by her praise. The translation layer is handling the test data well, but I need to optimize it for the full dataset. And there are still some edge cases I haven't accounted for. But the framework is solid now. I should be able to complete the full migration by morning. Elise nodded slowly, her eyes still on the code. Then she did something that shocked him. She pulled up a chair next to his. I'll help. What? I'll help, she repeated, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for a CEO to roll up her sleeves at 2 a.m. I wrote most of the original system. It'll go faster with both of us. For the next 4 hours, they worked side by side in a strange, focused harmony. Elise was brilliant, there was no denying that, and as the night wore on, her icy demeanor thawed slightly. She explained the reasoning behind certain design choices, listened to his suggestions without dismissing them outright, and even laughed once when he made a joke about recursive functions that would only be funny to someone deeply immersed in code. Mark found himself revising his opinion of her. Yes, she was demanding and intimidating, but she was also incredibly knowledgeable and, when she chose to be, a good collaborator.